Welcome back to the Ichi podcast, the IMP. My name is NW Epic, and I'm joined by my co-host Namlana. And yes, it has been a while. I don't need my co-host to tell me that it's been a while since we've last been on a podcast.
It's been a while.
It's been a while. iPhone 28 is now out, or is that iPhone 30? I don't know. It doesn't really matter. But there's a lot of stuff that's been going on recently. A lot of interesting stuff to talk about. Maybe in the future we'll talk about it. Macross 2's Kickstarter's been successful. The live action Yu Yu Hakusho. There's been a lot of great anime this year. Hunter x Hunter is getting a fighting game by 80. Oh my gosh. And also apparently just Japanese or in Japan, excuse me. Apparently Ikebukuro is on the rise for the otaku, and Akihabara is on the decline. Very interesting. However, we're not here to talk about general things today. We are here to talk about Miyazaki's potentially his last film as director, or at least his last completed film, The Boy and the Heron, or by its Japanese name, Kimitachi wa Do Ikiruka. So, yeah, we went and we watched this early. We've watched it twice, so we watched both the sub and the dub. And to say our early perceptions of it are mixed. I felt like after the second viewing, we were a little more negative towards it, but hopefully, we talk about it a little bit. I did a little research, and we can, come out of it with a new perspective on the movie. So, yeah, to kick it off, I'm just curious to hear, well, should we do a rough synopsis of the plot, or do you think we can just go into, sort of breaking down this movie piece by piece?
I think. Can you really do a synopsis for this movie?
you kinda. I mean, I think my initial after the second viewing, my brain sort of was like, okay, this movie is either A, different segments of a childhood, or different segments of memories kind of just haphazardly changed together, or B, it had multiple directors who directed bits and pieces, and then you had the top director being Miyazaki, who just sort of pushed it together. But I mean, we can give it.
When Hayao directs, he's in control of everything. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, but and that's sort of, and if that gives you a clue of sort of our feelings, just to give it an initial response, it just feels very, what's the word, incohesive. Just kind of like a bunch of different segments put together, plot points introduced but not necessarily effectively delivered on. And ultimately, just the movie ends with sort of a fart. It just sort of ends. But let's try to give just a high level summary, right? Essentially, the story focuses on Mahito. And I did research. He's 12 years old, which I don't think they ever state in the movie, but whatever. He's 12 years old, and he's coming off of the Pacific War. So essentially, towards the end of World War II, his mother dies in a fire, and thus he and his father relocate to a new town, where his father has now hooked up with, I say hooked up, he is now, I guess, married or in a relationship with his mother's aunt, or his mother's sister, excuse me. And essentially Mahito is navigating, I guess, this new family, this new location, whilst discovering a portal to this other world where his mother is seemingly alive in. And thus, we sort of follow Mahito in his journey to sort of I guess, get rid of his trauma or understand his trauma through the fantasy world, and ultimately, come to accept or appreciate his new family, his new life, essentially. So that's a very high level summary of the movie. I guess let's just go into let's do the characters first, because I feel like, if anything, they're the most important bits of this movie. How did you feel about Mahito as a protagonist?
The characters in this, in general, I just did not care about them at all. 2.5 out of 10.
The 2.5 out of 10.
Did not care.
There was
just for characters.
Interesting. Was there no character that I don't know, stood out a little bit to you, or just there was anything to grab onto?
Nope.
Well, I will say I sort of agree. I'm trying to think of who was most memorable to me. But the thing is, I felt like even though the movie had a 2-hour runtime, none of the characters had enough meat to them to just sort of be, I guess, memorable or you necessarily rooting for them or whatever. Like Mahito just as the protagonist, obviously we follow him the most throughout the plot, but he doesn't necessarily like even though it's a journey for him to like grow or move past his trauma, like that's the illusions that we're supposed to be taking from the story. He never really emotes. Like he only has like stoic as his one personality trait. It feels.
You're right.
The only time you see like slight emotion is in the scene where
He's eating that bread.
he find eating the oh yeah well two actually. So when he eats the bread from Himi, and we'll go into those characters in a little bit. When he eats the bread from Himi, or when he sees Natsuko uh in the world as well, when he finally finds her, and you know he essentially at that point he's like, okay, this is my new mom, and he accepts her as his new mom. But other than that, like the kid just sort of has this one face, and he's just again you sort of get this like rebellious, like I don't like my environment, I don't like what's going on, my mom's dead, like you know teenager style type energy. But at the same time, he just never really shows that evolution much at all. Again, the other characters are sort of one note. Going back to Natsuko, which Natsuko is the sister of his mother or his father's new wife. Um, I think what they were trying to portray with her in the story is essentially right. Like she's a new wife. She's trying to build this bridge of familial bonds with Mahito, but Mahito doesn't really want any of it. Obviously, he's a young kid. He's still grieving the loss of his mother. And so what that translates into is like, you know, she's sick from her own pregnancy and she really doesn't have time to deal with this kid. And so when you get to that scene where she rejects him, you know, we're supposed to, I guess, organically like understand like that's what's going on. That's why she's like, I hate you. But she doesn't
That was a
the movie
complete
doesn't give
opposite of organic.
yeah, like the movie doesn't really build you that way. Like you have to what's the word I'm looking for? You have to do detective work and you also just have to sort of understand like repeat viewings or like I don't know. The movie doesn't naturally get you to that conclusion that that's what's supposed to happen. And honestly, she was really the only other character with any actual like on-screen like development. The Heron, for instance, you know, we're supposed to believe that through his journey with Maito that he you know, they become real friends, but nothing that they ever do really showcases that they're friends by the end of it. Like it's a pretty antagonistical relationship up until like the very end, and now they're like, oh, we're friends, but y'all haven't done anything. Like what really got me as like the huge cognitive dissonance of their like relationship is I don't know if you remember the scene where Mahito what was it? So essentially when they're fixing the hole in his beak, right? And essentially they fixed it and now he's gotten his flight back, he can become a heron again. And then he's like, look kid, we're neither friends nor allies. And he's about to be, you know, he's about to be antagonistical to him again. But then like, you know, then he's like, this thing, it feels uncomfortable, and they fix it again. It's supposed to be a funny scene. And then they just act like, oh, now we're allies again, we're friends, without any sort of like actual like on screen like I don't know. I can't think of the word, but I think you get what I'm saying. Like, really, there was just no like focus on like organically developing these characters through this plot, and I think the movie really suffered for it because again, like there was no character to really attach yourself to, not the protagonist, not the side characters. At most, I really liked the older ladies or the keepers or whatever their official title was, mostly because not necessarily through dialogue or through story, but just through animation. Like I really like the energy that they conveyed, and again, when we start talking about animation, obviously gorgeous, and in its own way develops the characters. But it was just the movie did not do a great job with either its plot or developing its characters. But yes, I can understand why you why you're just like, yeah, I have nothing to add about the characters because they were pretty flat all around.
You heard it here first. He likes older ladies.
Better older ladies than children. So we'll
You
just
said it,
put
not
it
me.
like that. I'm just saying. I don't. Anyways, um, let's see. So I guess the story, because I guess we started with the characters, but to understand sort of what we mean by all these specific moments, we have to delve into the story a little bit more past the synopsis.
I did give scores for each category of
Mm,
art, music stuff. If you're interested.
gotcha. Yeah, go ahead. Well, actually, let's go there first then. Yeah.
Okay, art 10 out of 10. Of course, you can't really say otherwise with Studio Ghibli. Animation also 10 out of 10. It's always got that little breath of life and everything on screen. Like you know how
Yes.
the car his dad owns. It's not static. It's not a stiff box. It's all like
Hmm.
warpy and organic movement.
Yeah.
And
No, I
the
definitely
scene with
agree.
the bow when he shoots it at the wall. I think there was a preview of that like years ago. Like the keyframes for that.
Mm.
I was like, that looks crazy. Although that's the only time they ever animated like that in the whole movie. A little
Well, I mean,
weird.
honestly, that bow really just shows up for that little segment, and it has no like
That's
they
it.
give you almost like a training montage of him like learning to put together this bow and arrow, and then they enchant the bow and arrow like that's going to be a huge plot point, and then he uses it once significantly, and that's it. It's gone.
Yep.
But yeah, sorry.
Music 7.5 out of 10. It was good, not memorable at pretty much at all. Probably my favorite track was the Water Water scene, but yeah, but other than that, it's just basically not memorable. It's just I don't know. Just it's fine, it's serviceable.
Yeah.
Sound design. Okay, when we watched it the first time, I gave it an 8 out of 10. The design was good. The
Mm,
execution was kind of off sometimes. I blame that on the theater.
yeah.
When we
What about
watched
second
the
time
dub,
then?
it was a little more natural, but it wasn't as detailed. So I'll also give it an 8 out of 10. The
Personally, a 10 out of 10 for me, but I understand.
like it didn't have see the problem with the first time we watched it, the subbed, it had almost too much directionality. Like just if you had a
Mm,
sound in the back corner, only one speaker would play that sound in the back corner. Like, that's a little bit too unnatural, I would say.
mm,
And the dub viewing we saw, because it's such a small theater, and I don't think they have such a as fancy speaker setup.
mm-hmm.
One sound in the back corner kind of filled up like that half of the room, and there's not a lot of directionality.
Yeah. I will say I don't know if you caught this. It was really random when we watched it the second time. Like when the parakeets during one of the parakeet scenes, I heard like a sound in like the back corner, just like
Oh
a
yeah,
low sound. It
it,
sounded like one of the parakeets. I was like, what's
I
going
was
on?
pretty sure that's a parakeet like talking.
Yeah.
Yeah, at
So
first I thought that was
that was
some
a
guy
neat touch.
talking, but yeah, it was pretty. It was the parakeet.
Yeah.
Let's see. A setting 5 out of 10. You introduced me to this cool, incredible, spectacular, fantastical world, and you didn't explore any of it.
Mm-hmm.
I guess some people might say like that's what Ghibli does. You just dumped in this world, but I would say Spirited Away did a way better job of like just dumping you into this world, but it's still a little grounded. You can kind of figure out how things work because yeah, it's a bathhouse. It's filled with spirits and all kinds of things, but you can see on screen like what's going on, how it interacts with all the background characters and the environment. Well, in this movie, you just stuff keeps happening. Things come on screen, go off screen, never come back again. Like there's no
It's
I
not
don't
cohesive.
know. There's no groundedness. It's disjointed. Not
Yeah.
cohesive. You just expect to just forget about what you just saw since it doesn't really matter.
It's interesting that you mentioned Spirited Away as well because I looked up and quite a few people were drawing allusions to Spirited Away with this movie, saying that it's a similar sort of premise or general
Hell
structure.
no.
That's what they said. That's what they
I
said. Now
guess
it's
I
been
guess it starts out
it's
the
been
similar.
years.
I guess that does go into my next point, but keep going.
Well, no, I mean expand on your point.
Now, I was gonna say story. I gave 4 out of 10. The premise was promising. Like I can kind of see the movie's going to be about this fight with the Heron throughout the whole tower, or just, like the final boss. He's actually the final boss, and it's actually represents his grief or something. And like, oh,
Yeah.
this bow we built the whole like half hour. It's going to be pretty useful for things. Like it's not.
No, it's not. Yeah, going back to the Spirited Away comparison, I think again it's more so based off of the underlying like this is a child with this trauma of this new experience or this thing that has occurred, and then their journey to like coming to terms with it or that thing changing. The difference I think with Spirited Away is just that it's a much more cohesive story. So like everything makes sense and you naturally can perceive what's going on with its main character versus this story where it's almost like you just have a scene generator and you put the protagonist into these new scenarios without any rhyme or reason. Like I don't understand how anybody's supposed to go to that at least the general populace, right? I don't understand how anyone's supposed to go to that movie and come back with that understanding. And arguably, I would say too, like if you have to watch a movie multiple times like that to get the understanding, it has to be a good movie to warrant that. And that's not to say that this is necessarily a bad movie, but it is to say like it's not complex. How do I put this? It's not a movie that's like screaming like, "Oh, I'm complex. Please study me for a deeper, more enjoyable experience on rewatches." It's more so like this is just confusingly put together and you don't give your characters enough breath to really express the themes that you're trying to portray from your movie. At least from my watchings of it. So yeah, I'm actually surprised though that you give it a 4. The story. So I'm curious, how did it get those 4 points? What were some things that sort of did help it in your mind to give it that 4?
I mean, that's kind of 4 to 10. I gave it 4 to 10 because the premise was probably the starting out,
Mm.
the whole beginning part. But then, like I said before, like things just start happening. Well, I guess like it goes into my next score progression, 2.5 out of 10.
2.5.
I mean, it's kind of
2.5.
all. I guess story's kind of a combination of progression, setting, and characters. Kind of like characters I gave earlier, 2.5 to 10. Could not care less
Yeah.
because
So,
they don't react to their environment. The dude has count number of times he showed emotion on your hand, one hand.
yes.
Uh, and like you said, the movie's not something that screams out complex. But then midway through, you kind of realize it is complex.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because before, okay, after the first time we watched the sub, I was like, gotta see the reviews on this thing. I need to see the theories. Like, and I see some theories online. Like, this is mostly
Hmm.
biographical for Hayao Miyazaki, since it's kind of showing him in his like his studio, his works, his life works, his
Yeah.
fantastical world he built
Yeah.
and looking for a successor. Well, like, he is both the grand great grand uncle and Mahito, since the starting out the setting for the character like being in the war, moving out of town because of the war and moving back and all that happened to him
Mhm.
IRL. His father was a aircraft engineer. What?
So would do you think it would be correct to say that he was both the great granduncle and Mahito up until the very last scene where he's talking to Goro? Goro becomes
Yeah,
Mahito
he's
and he's like,
basically
"Sure."
talking to Goro like, yeah, you don't have,
He's like,
you
"Just
just
release a
go, just
movie
get out
every
of
once
here.
in a while." Just make something better than Earthsea and what's the little witch one, the little
Yeah,
3D one
Earwig and
he
the
made?
Witch.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some
I'm
other
sorry. That was the first thing
some
that came to my mind when you said that. Sorry.
I mean, that's basically it with that ending bit. But he did point out 13 Stones, and some people online said, this film is Miyazaki's 12th film. Maybe he'll do one more.
Mm.
And I was like, that'd be pretty cool, but he's getting old.
He is getting pretty
He's
old. Yeah.
getting old. You
I would say if he
sure.
does another one, maybe a little less autobiographical and just more whimsical fantasy. Because I think, and we can touch on that in a second once we go through all your rankings. But he really like the entire team nails like the fantasy aspect. Like if I wasn't sitting there just trying to understand the plot, like I could totally see myself immersed in just the world that he built. Like I guess they didn't even really name that world, but the fantasy world that Mahito goes into, like just from the animation and the intrinsically designed, just everything really, like everything was really well done in that aspect. Just the plot was not great. But anyway, sorry, you were about to say something.
Oh no, I'm done with my ranks. I have my impressions that I wrote for the my friends in the other server, Discord server, that were
Oh, go ahead then.
somehow interested. I made sure to when this was written after we first watched it, so it's kind of spoiler free. So
Mm.
I'll go line by line. I'd say his bottom third or quarter of all of Ghibli's films. easily the bottom third.
Interesting. Interesting.
Maybe there are like 2/3 of films that I would put above this. I would also rank it below Weathering with You as an overall package.
Mm.
Because Weathering with You has like the romance, the slice of life, the build up, the peak, the ending, all that. Which that's a pretty Western approach, but it works. You can the audience can follow along. But with this film, you will leave more confused than you entered. Lots of things happening while nothing happened. Some moments were good. Some moments were just I don't know what has happened. Things that looked important are just pretty much hand waved away in the next scene. Like the gate, the golden gate. All who
Hmm.
wish to enter will die or something, or those who wish to gain knowledge. Like oh, you opened the gate. Oh no, and then it never comes back again.
Never comes back again.
Yeah, the whole thing is kind of overly fantastical.
Hmm.
Little to no coherence. It's hard to tell between if it's abstract or just Hayao just going senile. Maybe as his last film, it's much more soulful and personal for him, and guess I guess it is after the second watch and reading reviews online. But letting it be soulful and personal for him is not what lets it reach like wide global audiences like the other films.
Yeah. Let me stop you right there for a second and ask a question. From that point, I've seen other points online where people are basically saying like, this is not necessarily a movie for the populace. This is a movie for the critic, and also again, this is a personal movie.
Yeah, I could see that, but he does that with his other films like
Mm.
fantastically. Like for there's this is like a surface level understanding or plot or complexity for the general audience, and for those like who want to dig a little bit deeper and look at all the allegories and all of that, it's there too. So
Yeah,
there's a little bit of something for everybody at every level.
yeah. I was gonna say that. I think that's a criticism levied at The Wind Rises if you really peel back the the layers on that one. But
Like reviews say, oh, it's thought provoking, and that just sounds like copium for like we didn't get it either.
yeah, it's thought provoking. All right, thought was provoked. Was it good thought? Yes, I agree.
I don't know. If it ain't thought provoking, are you a critic at all? Well, I guess not.
Yeah, I guess not.
Like in my opinion, it doesn't have an easy surface level understanding for wider audiences and a deeper level interpretation for like the film geeks and the English majors.
Mm.
It has traditional Ghibli themes of like immersing the viewer and simply experiencing the ups and downs of life, like pretty much every Ghibli film. But they're placed in weird places,
Mm-hmm.
like the bread scene. Like you're God, I don't know if they told him there's one day left, and they're just probably not. I guess it happened after
Yeah.
when they got kidnapped or something. But like yeah, one you got one day left in the world. Let's waste some time eating some bread, butter. I guess I was wrong on the timing for that. But there's just no sense of urgency. Characters cardboard for pretty much the entire film. And like I said before, you can count on one hand how many times they show emotion. In the beginning, when Mahito's sinking to the floor, he's just not reacting at all. He's just staring down that bird, like I'm gonna get you.
Shonen protagonist energy, my dude. That's all. That's all that
Yeah,
is.
he pretty much didn't react to the crazy fantastical world around him for pretty much the whole thing.
Yeah.
That makes it like the complete opposite of Spirited Away, where I forgot her name. I forgot the protagonist's name.
I don't
Uh,
remember her name either.
dang, I forgot. But
It's okay.
she's just like she's like staying quiet, but she's like looking around, like what is this place? And
Yeah.
she's just simply
It
going
is.
along with it.
Yeah, and it's disappointing because again, like obviously,
Chihiro,
if it's
yeah,
autobiographical, Chihiro. Okay, yeah, that's right. Yeah, if it's autobiographical, right? Like I get it to a certain extent, but like if you're going to set your thing in like a fantasy world, your protagonist is technically in a lot of cases supposed to be your vehicle for like experiencing this new world. Now obviously there's the nuance of the character having their own sort of emotion or their own perceptions and stuff like that and how they handle things, which, grounds them and, makes them a character. But like Mahito didn't have any of that. He had nothing. He barely reacted to anything. He was straightforward. Like he was just it was almost again like he was just going from point A to point
yeah.
B.
The environment was simply an inconvenience to him.
Absolutely.
I mean, I guess, think about it. You could kind of say, oh, that's just how much grief he had. That's the big contrast. Everything, all of this is happening, and he's just just laser focused on his goal. I guess that's just how bad his grief is. I'm like, yeah, if that were
But
true,
no,
you could just show it in other ways that instead of just
but
being
that's
a
not even
rock.
true in that. Well, I was gonna say, like, again, his initial reasoning for even going into that world, for following the Heron, was because of his mother.
Yeah.
But then he meets his mother, and then automatically now the mission changes from, oh, I need to find my mother, to, oh, I need to find Natsuko, which technically is his mother, stepmother, but like,
If someone told me that reasoning, like, oh, he really did find his mother, I'm gonna say I'm calling it some bullshit.
well, it's just a switch, and it's such an inorganic switch. Like, again, he did not step into that world to find Natsuko. Like, originally he was searching for Natsuko. Like, obviously that is one of the reasons he went searching anyways. But his curiosity at the Heron, like, I've heard that, obviously he's a young boy. He's just turning his anger or hatred towards like this animal. But like, no, like, I mean, clearly the bird was antagonizing him, so that's understandable. And then like the bird is like telling him, "Your mother's still alive. Here's your mother." The mother recreates the heron. Excuse me. The heron recreates his mother and is taunting him and essentially foist him into the world. And
I
then like
yeah.
that's supposed to be his motivation. Like that his motivation was Himi. He meets Himi and it's not even like a joyous thing. It's sort of like she says, what does she say? She said, "Oh, Natsuko is my younger sister." And he's like, "Younger sister?" And then he's just done.
Yep.
That's it.
Yeah.
There's no like Zelda, like I found this treasure chest theme, or like there's no like realization. It's just like, oh, okay, let's move on to the next objective. I need to go find Natsuko.
I think
Um,
it was definitely the flip flopping between mother, Natsuko, and back again, back to Natsuko.
yes.
Especially at the beginning. Like he read the book from his mom. Like, all right, you read the book. Now what? Do you feel like you should be nicer to Natsuko? All right, well let's go save Natsuko. That's fine. And then he went back to worrying about his mother. Like, come on, pick one.
Yeah, yeah. Just again that situation of like things are introduced, but they're not wholly expanded on, or they're not even really satisfactorily concluded. Um, But anyways, any more sort of general thoughts that you had that you wrote down?
Yeah, this is definitely the kind of film that requires multiple watches and probably a background knowledge on Hayao Miyazaki's like background work, his life
Yeah.
work, and all of his interactions with his son, being a bad father and stuff like that.
yeah.
But this but except this kind of film, you don't get a interpretation. Like it's different from watching something and getting one interpretation and rewatching get a different interpretation. This one you need to rewatch to arrive at your first interpretation.
Yeah.
Like it's not
And
something you can fully get in just one watching, unless you're
yeah.
some maniac. I don't know.
Something, yeah. Yeah, I think it's because again, I think and two, that's also not necessarily Studio Ghibli or Miyazaki's fault, but it's more so a fault of stereotype and perception. You go into this movie thinking, "Oh, this is just gonna be, nice, warm,
That's fair.
very well animated."
Right? We had
You know,
expectations.
we had expectations, and when those expectations weren't met, then we were confused. Now, the story in itself is very incoherent, and so once you rewatch it again, that view is solidified. But I do also think a lot of our perception is muddied just based off of again that early perception of what we're going into. I actually had no idea what the movie was going to be about.
Same.
I didn't look at any trailers. I didn't read anything. So I was just going in blind. So in the back of my head, like I was thinking it could be anywhere from Totoro to Princess Mononoke, right? And I mean, really, it does follow a similar structure to other Ghibli movies, but again, there's that interpersonal aspect that's been shoehorned in, combined with a lot of ideas that were proposed but weren't fully executed. So yeah, it's sort of an interesting case. I I think so. Going back to some of your other things that you stated, I don't know if I would put it necessarily as the worst, like one third. I haven't seen all of the Ghibli movies, but it's not that bad. To me, and I would also disagree about the Weathering with You. I think this is better than Weathering with You.
What?
More so on the fact that this movie, to me, just to me, I can't speak for anybody else, but this movie is more memorable, or it's going to be more memorable than Weathering with You.
It's memorable because it
Weathering,
confused the shit out of us.
but it's still memorable. But again, I think the world that was built is memorable to me, and there were scenes that like, wow, this is awesome. Like the character, the Heron, is a pretty unique looking creature, and just his personality, not that it was developed per se, but like the way he was animated, the way that he portrayed himself, even in his staticness, it's memorable to me. The Parakeet Kingdom, very memorable. I love those parakeets. And we when we went to our first viewing, it was just us and like three other people in that theater, so there was really no reaction. But when we went to our second one, it was a full theater, it was in the dub, so people had more time to actually pay attention to all of the animation going on, all of the character interactions, blah blah blah, and people were really enjoying it. That they were laughing, and I think that also helped paint my perception a little bit too as well. Like when we had that initial viewing, it was just a different experience. And at the end of the day, Ghibli movies are, for all intents and purposes, supposed to be all family films. You can't really say that for all of them, but for most of them, they're family films. And like just listening to the people enjoy it, and seeing those moments again, like I did get a chuckle.
I think they kind of
Like,
enjoyed it a little too much. They were laughing at every single scene that came up. I'm like,
sure,
come
but
on.
who are we to tell people how to enjoy a media that they're interacting with? I think we can be a little jaded sometimes because we're just so engrossed in the medium, right? Like we see things and they don't hit us the same way. But for me, like when they hit that parakeet in the head with that ball, that was funny to
Oh
me.
yeah,
I mean, I
that's
think
obviously funny. But at the
yeah, I mean,
beginning when the heron just like does a flip and jumps to the hole, like that's pretty amusing. But like half the theater thought was the funniest shit they ever seen.
yeah, yes, and I thought that was kind of strange as well. But again, I think we can be a little jaded sometimes, and some of our joy and sort of some of our like what's the word I'm looking for? Our enjoyment of a medium can be distorted just based off of other things that we've seen, our life experiences, blah blah blah. I think if you're able to laugh at that, that's a great thing, and maybe that was the intended effect. Like I mean, again, looking back at that particular scene, it's very well animated. I could understand why on a surface level how you would find like, oh, the heron like puts himself into the little hole and like does the little animation, like just how well drawn and executed that just particular scene is, how that could be funny to you. It's similar to like the little kids like laughing at the Super Mario Brothers movie we went to go watch. We're just old dudes
Those are
just
kids
like,
though.
sure, but sometimes it's good to be able to just laugh at something like a child, I think. And again, I think that paints a perfect picture of why I think this movie is a little more memorable than Weathering with You. Like there's just certain aspects to it, whether it's just like particular scenes of animation, whether it's some of the plot points that, while not executed well, were still pretty strong. Like just the interactions in those individual segments, I'll remember those versus Weathering with You. Because I'll be honest, I don't remember much outside of like the poster for Weathering with You. Like I remember there was a heavy thing with rain, and modern day, I assume that was Tokyo or Japan at least. But it has not stayed with me like Suzume, and to a lesser extent, what was the first one? I can't even
Your
remember the
name.
name now. Your name, yes. Like Suzume, I thought was an excellent movie, and obviously that one's much better than this one. But again, it's the way that movie was built, the way that it was, animated and sort of storyboarded, and all of those different things. Weathering You is just kind of forgettable. Like it's very much a great piece of art, and this is a similar thing I can say about this movie. It's a great piece of art, but not necessarily a great story or memorable in that aspect. At the very least, there's moments that I'll remember in the future from this movie. I was trying to think of some of the other things that you touched on that I was gonna make a comment on, but I mean, I think with your ratings I probably mine would be bumped up just a little bit in some, but overall, I sort of agree with sort of how you felt about the movie. I know I keep going on this not executed thing, but I find that to just be such a disappointment because again, like it had potential to be maybe not necessarily like the greatest movie of all time, but like a really good movie with a good message. But a stoic protagonist and an incoherent plot layout, keeps it from being that. Like, what's the lady's name that he meets? Is that Kikyo? Is that her name or is it something else?
Kiriko.
Is it Hiriko?
Kiriko.
Kiriko. Okay, yes, that's right. Um, just the whole segment with her, like, again, that was the setup. I think that's when everything started to break down. Like, they brought her in, and they brought in the whole mythos with the Wara Wara, and just all of that stuff. And you're like, okay, we're about to be in this like awesome adventure. And but then it just devolves. Like she does her bit where she basically just saves them. And again, as you mentioned earlier, that gate that had no meaning whatsoever. It was just there. Um, you meet the pelicans or the seagulls or whatever they are, and they just kind of go away. Like her whole stick. Like if you just removed her from the story, you don't lose anything. And honestly, like if you take out a lot of the different segments of the story, you could arrive to the same conclusion without worry. And that's just not a good thing. Like you could have probably shaved off an hour from this movie and you would have lost nothing. And you probably could have shaved off more than an hour. Like it was world building without purpose. And the disappointing part of it is that you see potential in those characters. Like Kiriko could have been a fantastic, like, strong female lead character, but she just didn't get the time. Himi, which we haven't mentioned by name this entire review, who is like a younger version of Mahito's mother. We don't get the time with her. She's kind of just this great wizard in this world, and then he briefly realizes that that's his mother, and then that's it. And you don't get to really delve into like her inner psyche, like her understanding that this is her son, like her relationship with her grand uncle, like her relationship with her sister, what is really her role in that world and why is she in that world to begin with. Um and if she was able to do all these things in this world, like how does she get those powers in that world? Why did she die in the real world if she has these powers in this world? What's the connection between her having fire powers and her dying in a fire? All of these little minute things that they build on that caught my attention that I'm clearly interested in, but you do nothing with it. Why did Natsuko go to the tower to give birth? Why do you have all of these customs related to her birth process? How did we get to the point that she hated Mahito? Because again, as an adult, I can sort of understand what they were going for, but you didn't tell me that in the movie. And just like what are the roles of all of the older women, the gatekeepers? Like again, they're adorable with their animations and like their energy, but like what do they really add outside of Kiriko, which again we've already noted that she didn't add much to the story outside of just whimsical adventuring, why did you show us the War War? What do they really add to the story? They add nothing. They add nothing. They're just a segment and then they disappear. The Parakeet Kingdom. The only direct correlation that they have in the story is just the fact that the king, voiced by Dave Bautista in the dub, he is essentially directly involved in destroying the fantasy world at the end. But essentially, again, they're just another segment, like in a video game. The thing is almost laid out like a video game, just different levels that the protagonist goes through, and just none of it really matters at all. And that's disappointing because I think they built a really fun world to explore on top of these deep, undertones of a young boy learning to deal with his trauma. Like I think it could have been really effective, but they just didn't capitalize on any of the great elements that they had developed. I think this movie could have done with another 2 years in the lab. Obviously, Miyazaki's getting old, but still, like, it just wasn't cohesive enough. I think even for a critic, I think just because you're a critic doesn't mean that this movie is just, oh, it's the goodness. Like, I think there's an inherent value in a movie just being digestible, being straightforward in its themes, but being able to be digested so that anyone, can come in and watch it. Similar to, like you said, there are other movies where it's exactly the same thing. But with all of that said, I briefly hinted at something we haven't talked about, which is the voice actors on both sides. I thought both were serviceable. I didn't have any problems with any. I know you had a slight problem that we talked about outside of the podcast with the dub score, but honestly, in my personal opinion, I thought both were excellent. I did have a problem with the dad and the dub. I didn't really like that casting choice at
That
all.
New Yorker accent.
Yeah, like he just had this weird accent that didn't mesh with any of the other characters. It'd be one thing like if
I'm walking
you
here.
yeah, it'd make a lot more sense if it was more cohesive, like with all of the other. And cohesive is the buzzword of the day. But if it was more cohesive with the rest of the dub actors, but no, it was just out of place, and I was like, oh, okay, what are they doing here?
Well, even the
But
speech was kind of off. I told you yesterday or last night, like the dub, they would speak like normal American English, and then when they come to one like word or name, and they do it with a kind of overly done accented way. Mojito. Like, dude, he's not a drink. Just say mojito or something like normal. I would expect Americans to say.
I mean, I get what you're saying. For me personally, I think it was better than the alternative. And honestly, I mean, I thought it made sense. Like, I felt like they did an awesome job of actually pronouncing these Japanese names in an effective manner to still sort of convey, like, even though this is a dub, this is still set in Japan.
Then
Um,
get the New Yorker dude out of here.
that's what I'm saying. That's why I was saying he was the worst one. But even Dave Batista, right? Like he did a fantastic job. Like I was going in expecting to hear like almost this comical like Disney style like work from him specifically, but no, my man, he did good. You could not perceive that it was him,
I
and
could
for
tell.
that I give him kudos. I didn't know it was him.
Like, I
Which
know you before the movie you mentioned, oh, Dave Bautista's in the guy. It's like I've been looking for him the whole movie. Then he I started to notice the king. I was like, that's probably him. It sounds just like him. The
mm.
the
he
timbre of
did
his
he did a good
voice.
job to me.
Yeah, that was a good one.
He did a pretty good job. Again, I give that to all of the dub casts. I don't know who dubbed who or who did each character, but I feel like for all intents and purposes, it was a pretty strong dub. And again, going back to the Japanese names, better them say Mahito than them saying Daisuke. You know, so
I mean,
I
there's a
thought it
difference
was
between like pronouncing like the correct like accents or intonations versus like pronouncing every single syllable like
but
overly done.
that easily that easily could have been what happened though. Like even with the best dubs, like sometimes it just slips in because again, for some of these people, obviously
Yeah, man,
they
if that
have
happens, it's
that.
not the best. No,
I'm just saying. I'm just saying. Sometimes that just naturally
like people
happens.
say Naruto, like, well, uh, is tough.
That's what
But
I'm
I'm not
saying.
expecting him to be like just suddenly switch to like perfect Japanese accent, like Naruto. Like just say Naruto normally, but just correct the pitch accent.
I get you. I get you. I err on the side of cutting them a little more slack. And speaking of slack, I think the Japanese seiyus were they were pretty good as well. I do think especially after rewatch, the seiyu for Mahito definitely did a better job of conveying that stoicness than the dubbed actor did, which is I think more of a detriment if anything. At least there was a slight bit more emotion in the dub actor's voice, in my opinion, than
Yeah,
this the Japanese voice actor, and which I think to a slight degree helps the dub a little bit have more energy. Cause I mean, obviously his seiyu is like his really matches what we see on screen from that character, and it just further cements just how sort of dull this kid is to be following as a main character. But no, I think it was a pretty good performance all around. So that was pretty good. And speaking of the dad, that also reminded me too. I understand using World War II as the backdrop because again the autobiographical elements of it, and as well as it does help you set up the stage for the character. But I feel like they could have did a lot more with that again, like especially cutting back to the scenes with the dad, like or even showing that he owns this what is it like I assume the shops for like building the airplanes and stuff like, or the factory, excuse me, for building the airplanes and stuff like. Do a little more with that. Like you had this heavy bird element. And obviously, we know that Miyazaki, has a love of, airplanes, or at least there's a technical term for flying devices or flying vehicles. I can't think of it right now, but you know what I mean. Like, incorporate that. Like, you showed us, like, in meticulous, detail, like these workers, like bringing up the what would you call it? Would you call that the cockpit hole? Is that the right word? Is
The windshield,
what's
yeah, the cockpit windshield,
yeah,
glass.
yeah, the cockpit windshield, the glass and stuff, like all of this stuff. But you didn't do anything with it. Again, like, expand on that. Make the dad a more central character outside of, confusing Western audiences with how the hell did he get with his his wife's uh sister so fast, which again, there's historical elements to that are going to be missed, especially, in the modern day where that doesn't make as much sense. I think people are a little too quick to hop to like a misunderstanding of something. There's obviously historical significance there, but all that said, like, yeah, I think for me, I don't think it's a bad movie. It's just a disappointing movie, which for some people, that's probably
Heresy.
that's a harsher, yeah. Well, heresy, but a harsher criticism is it's more harsh to be disappointed in something than to just state that something's bad. Um, yeah, but I think, again, going back to your point, I wouldn't say it's one of the worst. I think there's a lot of good stuff here. It just wasn't developed. But yeah, I think that's all that we really need to say. I mean, again, we didn't really touch on the plot. We just touched on plot points, but I mean, again, I think there's no.
No plot.
Well, first of all, yeah, there's no plot. Like, it's really just a point A to point B. I guess I didn't highlight it enough, but again, the animation, and you stated this, the animation really does a lot of the heavy lifting of, like, personality, just for both the world and the characters. Like, the Heron is just super menacing until he becomes like this little comedic gnome thing, but it's done seamlessly. Um, and just the attention to detail to that is, like, just really awesome. Like, the little small flourishes you see. Like, again, I think I mentioned to you, like, when they were sneaking into the Parakeet Kingdom, that scene where they're just, I think they were going through a mountain or something, and just the little water effects just fall on them, or the specific scene where Mahito is drinking from the little water glass, and you just see the water sort of just go through the glass, and the little, I don't want to call it embers, but like the little small, like, bits of water at the end, like, just small things like that really just do a heavy lifting for personality. But it's just so good, like, you can't help but notice it. Even if you're not like a critic, you just notice just how beautiful everything's done. And especially for the Parakeet Kingdoms, like, the personality of those parakeets that was derived just from the animation, like, they were so fun. They were just, like, cartoonishly villainous, but then, like, you immediately, like, juxtapose that with the king, who was just serious business, and it was just done effortlessly. Animation, I can't understate enough. Like, it was really fantastic, and all the studios that assisted with that. I forgot to make a list of all the ones, but I do remember. Do you pronounce it ufotable? Ufotable?
I guess it would be
Is that
UFO table.
UFO table? I guess that's UFO table.
Well, I just know
They
how to say UFO or UFO in Japan. It's just
Yeah,
UFO.
I guess that's true. UFO table. They
I do say ufotable
I'm
sometimes.
Yeah, it just sounds better. It sounds better. Ufotable. I'm pretty sure they did the early
The
scenes.
3D, I would say.
Yeah. Or even just the scenes, like, where Mahito's running through the flames and stuff like that, like, just awesome. Like, it just
I
looked extremely
not
good.
sure, but I think one of their main Ghibli guys did that scene. I
Interesting.
don't.
You don't think that was ufotable? UFO table?
I want to say it was one of their main guys. I
Could have been.
I don't think they would make such a major scene like that outsourced.
That's true. It was masterfully done. That's all I have to say. It was very masterfully done. Masterfully done. Like, it sets the stage for this movie, which I think makes it more disappointing the further you get in, cause, like, it was so done. Like, it was just so well done. Excuse me. Just, yeah, art and animation impeccable. But I mean, it's a Ghibli movie, so that's to somewhat be expected. At least if Hayao Miyazaki's in the director's chair. Takahata's another one that has directed some of the movies,
Yeah,
right?
he's basically his partner in crime.
Yeah, so I think if it's Hayao or Takahata, you're in good hands. I don't want to just hate on Goro, but I don't know if his heart is really into it. I haven't read all the interviews
pretty
and
sure he
stuff.
refused taking over or
Yeah,
turned
so
down the opportunity.
which makes sense. I don't blame him. I really don't blame him. But
He's mojito for real, for real.
yeah. Well, he's mojito at a certain point. At a certain point.
Mojito.
Um, yeah, yeah. That you saying that just made me again think about all of the different rules and world building again, like with the tower pieces and the fact that the world only exists for one day. Like, why even introduce all of those elements and do nothing with it? But I digress. I've
Oh,
already
these
spent an
blocks are
hour.
filled with malice. I'm like, oh, okay,
Yes,
that's it.
yes,
And apparently he got some
uh,
brand new ones that don't have them, that he traveled far in the
yes,
world for. Like, no,
yes.
you didn't. You only got these now.
Why, man? Like, you know, going back to Himi. Sorry, I just thought about this. Going back to Himi, right? Like, again, she has these fire powers, and sure, okay, you have the excuse of like these fantastical, whimsical elements only exist in the fantasy world. Cool. When they leave the fantasy world, we get to see direct instances of like some of the magical property. Now, again, it's more so like things, excuse me, returning to normal. But for one, the Heron existed in that world. Like he existed in the regular world,
Yeah,
quote unquote. And he was doing his thing in the regular world. And he even summoned some fantastical elements towards the beginning of the movie. At the end, again, like
the tower is
the
gone.
Heron is, yeah, yeah. I mean, the tower's gone, sure, but like he tries to introduce this element at the end of like, oh, forget everything that you saw. Like basically like
I wish I could.
yeah, this is the point. Yeah, this is over. But in the next direct scene, Kiriko comes out of his pocket from the little doll. Again, we didn't expand on this, but this is a part of the story. Kiriko comes out of his pocket like as her full human self. Again, like clearly magic exists in the real world. So what exactly?
I don't even remember the
Excuse me.
scene where he got the doll from Kiri, the the magic Kiriko. I don't remember that scene at all in the dub.
I actually saw it in the dub because I went to the restroom when we went to watch it the first time. It was during that
When
part.
he got the doll,
I yeah, when he got the doll, I vividly remember him
I remember the
getting the
sub,
doll
not
from.
the dub.
Yeah, it was because it was at the part where he's leaving with the Heron. Like this is when he's successfully met up with the Heron again after he's finished burying that dead seagull. And then she's like, "All right, well, the I forget what the grand uncle's official titles was, but basically they were like, all right, well, you need to go find Natsuko, Himi,
Yeah, I
whoever they were
remember that
looking
scene.
for
It's
at
like,
this
oh,
point
you
in
two
time.
should go together.
Yeah, and that's when she hands it to
I
him.
didn't remember that scene at all.
Yeah, that's when she hands it to him. It's sort of a blink and you miss it sort of scene, but that's when she's like, here, take this for safekeeping. Clearly, she like sort of knows what's going on, but again, you don't expand on it. All of it's just kind of either just introduced or brushed away or what have you. So, anyways, yeah, even the part with the meteorite being the tower and the tower being built around the meteorite and the importance of that. I mean, isn't the world still technically there? Just the human built tower collapsed around it? I don't know. I don't know. Just, yeah, just disappointing. But I'm not here to complain.
Yeah, we
Again,
are.
I don't want
That's
to.
the whole point of this
We're not
episode.
here. We're not here to
That's
complain.
the
I
whole
think
point.
it's not the whole point because there's good parts to this story. Again, you can perceive what he was going for, but it does require multiple watch, and I would also argue a little more understanding of that type of life, or sort of that feeling of dealing with trauma, like, and just community talking with others and just having a discussion, which I mean is not necessarily a bad thing to have with a movie if you're generating discussion. Although there is an argument that if it's discussion out of confusion, then you probably have failed. But like generating discussion is a good thing. The animation was superb. Some of the little segments in between, the actual individual segments that they build up, give you a taste of something that you want. The disappointing aspect is just that you don't get it. And I probably said that about like 15 times. So I again going back to that Weathering You comparison, I wasn't disappointed with Weathering with You. It was an okay movie. I'm disappointed with this movie not because of the name attached to it or the studio, but because of what could have been, because of what the movie actually presented me. And I think that's the best way for me to put it as why I would technically put it above that movie. Again, that sentiment of something that just is bad. Well, how would I put this? No, I would say I like something that's a little more disappointing rather than just is okay. Something that's okay is you'll forget about it. I've forgotten everything about Weathering with You, but I won't forget this movie. I won't forget this feeling necessarily of like something that could have been.
That's
That doesn't make it a
that's
great.
not a
That doesn't make it a.
really a good thing.
It's not, and that's what I was about to say. It's not a great movie, but it is a fun movie with a huge asterisk of like,
Don't pay attention.
why? Why
You don't
didn't you?
have to,
Yeah,
don't think about it.
just turn your head off. Just turn your head off. Enjoy the ride, and you'll enjoy it. You'll enjoy
See,
yourself.
I gave
So
Withering with You. I said it's a better overall package. None of it reaches like 10 out of 10s in any aspect, I think. But the average level of all those things are higher than this one's like, oh, 10s in the art animation, 2.5s in the character and progression. That
yeah.
averages it in overall lower than Withering with You.
And honestly, I agree with that sentiment. Like, I think this is more so my personal thing. Like, if somebody said like I think Weathering with You is a better movie than The Boy and the Heron, I would honestly. Now I know I said I didn't agree, but that's my personal. Technically, I do agree with you. Like, it's just an overall better package. It's a cohesive plot. It's well animated. Is it forgettable? Yes, but it's a good ride if you've watched it, and arguably, warrants a rewatch every once in a while. But for me, this movie just had so many elements that I really liked or I wanted to like. It just didn't deliver on them. And so, but it's also, there's particular things that I really, really did love about the movie that will stick with me versus, Weathering with You. And that's why it edges just slightly for me, personally. But I do agree, like, Weathering with You is absolutely a better package, a better story, just everything. But yeah, I mean, I think we've said all that needs to be said about this movie. Do you have any closing remarks?
I guess in my original review that I wrote down, this was like the day after we watched the sum. I wrote, I didn't believe I received any net value or culture from watching this, other than now I just have an opinion on it. And
Yeah.
if I drove any more than I did to go see it, I would probably be more disappointed.
Well, if you actually did have to drive, you probably would have been a little more disappointed. Yeah.
I mean, I
I think
guess
I do agree.
I did get a little bit more culture from it than that statement, since it's just a reminder that Hayao is not some god wizard that just makes amazing things every time.
Yeah.
Graphics don't make the game, Sag.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Although I do think again, it sort of reinforces that feeling, right? Because we saw what could have been. So I mean, he is still a wizard. He didn't use all of his magic on this one, I guess. And it's disappointing, but it is what it is. I do think, going back to the culture statement, it is still such an awesome thing to be able to see a Miyazaki movie in theaters.
Yeah, it's been 10 years.
Even this is,
Since
yeah.
Wind Rises.
And I think it's an accomplishment of the human persistence. The man is 82, I believe, and he's released what arguably may be his last full theatrical release. He may still do short films, but the man is still directing, doing his thing, and like that's something to just be applauded. I mean, obviously this is an autobiographical thing, so he's dealt with his hardships, but he's built up his name and this studio and this legacy, and
It's gonna last for one
this
more
movie
day.
does not. Yeah, this movie doesn't take away from his legacy, and I think it adds to it in a sense. Like, there is disappointment, but it's not like it's a horrible movie. It's a confusing movie, or a incoherent movie, but it's still a fun ride, and a child could sort of watch this and still get enjoyment out of this. A family could go watch it and still get enjoyment out of it. The man has done amazing things, and I mean, it is as cheesy as it may sound, it's an honor to be able to potentially see his film in a theater. Where we're located. Not to dox ourselves, but like we don't get much anime around here, so to just be able to go to the movie and see a Studio Ghibli movie that he directed, a new one at that. It's an awesome feeling. So this will probably be the last time we'll ever get to experience that. So I mean, for that intent like it was a pretty good experience.
Yeah, that was kind of like the only recommendation I give it. Like you should watch it because it's the Ghibli
It's
movie.
history.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's history. And it's good enough to stand on that. Like, I would not put this movie as like one of the worst of all time, despite all of our criticism. Our criticism comes from a place of knowing that there could be better, and also just again disappointment because we were giving something to work with. So that's why I think it's not as bad as I think we could either make it seem or others could make it seem. Like it's a fun ride. Just turn your brain off. But yeah, I think stating that, I think we can go ahead and end this. Be on the lookout for more content from us, and thank you for listening. Until next time.